Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Melissa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Rockstar Doctor Life. I am here with the lovely Dr. Fiona Lovely. I'm looking forward to this conversation because Dr. Lovely is practicing chiropractor, but she's also teaching people, teaching women particularly, lots of really great information to support their overall health and well-being. And I think what she's working on is a value for all of you listening to support your own health, but also just to hear some opportunities like we always talk about on the show, about how you can impact others in another way, even outside of a clinical practice. So thanks for joining me today, Dr. Fiona.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Yeah, so I would love to hear first of all, your story. You know, how did you become a chiropractor? How many years are you in practice now? For the people who are just getting to know you, you know, who is Dr. Fiona? What are you up to these days?
Sure. So I'm in my 16th year of practice. I'm a Palmer College grad and main campus. And my story. Well, the abbreviated version is that I wanted to be a chiropractor when I first was a chiropractic patient when I was a kid. Like I was about 10 when I saw my first chiropractor. And I was just quite fascinated by her. She had these long denim skirts and Birkenstocks with socks. Listen, it was the late 70s is all I'm saying.
She made an impression on you. That's what matters.
She did. And I never really forgot her. And, you know, many years and many iterations of what I thought I wanted to do with my life. Later, I found myself taking an archaeology program. That was my undergrad. And about fourth year, I was trying to decide whether I was going to go off and do a master's or PhD in archaeology or forensic anthropology. I was kind of into that at the time. And this is before the days of CSI. And, you know, I thought, just a minute now, what about this chiropractic thing? And about, I think my last year, I met a faculty member at the University of Calgary who was a practicing chiropractor and a physical anthropologist. And I was like, wait a minute, these are like worlds colliding. Can I have these things together? And I guess the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. And so when you went to Palmer, when you graduated, did you relocate right back to Calgary? Did you start your own practice? Did you associate?
Oh gosh, I feel like I've done all the things.
Okay.
So after I graduated in Iowa, I moved to Colorado. My first practice was in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I met my husband. And, you know, after about 2 years, we kind of went, okay, well, should we try something different? You know, Canada was calling. My brother was having his kids, and I thought, okay, well, this is my chance to be the auntie. And so we came to Canada and went back to Calgary, which is where I still am. I've been here since 2008. And I have been an associate. I have been an independent contractor. I've run my own clinic for 10 years. And now I'm back to being an independent contractor in a large office. And I made that decision 3 years ago, just based on the fact that I was so stressed out about running a clinic and managing staff and being the admin person and the clinician. And it felt as I was getting into my own perimenopausal era, which is the thing I, you know, communicate to women. Yeah. One of the things I like to talk about, I thought, this is crazy. Like, why am I telling my patients that they should be avoiding stress? And I've got this massive stressor in my life. It's not fun to me running a business. I'm not having a good time, but I love being the clinician. Mm-hmm. And my husband said to me, well, so then you need to do something else, like the simplest thing in the world. You know, I was doing all these mental gymnastics thinking I had to try to force something to happen. And, you know, we're sort of taught in chiropractic college to have this rugged individualism that somehow one doctor, one office carrying most of the load is the way to do things. And that may be true if you're in a smaller area where commercial real estate rates are reasonable, but they are not here in Calgary, not reasonable at all. And I know there's lots of cities like that. And so I think for me anyways, there needed to be a rethinking of what it meant to be successful as a chiropractor. And I had beautiful opportunities in front of me. That's the cool thing about having practiced as long as I have, is that you're kind of in a neat place. You've got skills that people want. Mm-hmm. And it's a cool place to be. I can't say it's a pinnacle yet, but it's let me make space for you. What do you mean you want to join my practice? Really? And you've got a whole practice full of patients coming with you? Okay.
Well, there's two things that come to mind there. One is we are gifted in this profession that we get to create the practice that works for us. And one of my guests, I think it was Dr. Terry Warner, said this 2-3 years ago, right? Saying you can create your own blueprint. You can, if you're in a private practice, you can change your hours whenever you want. You could hire more people. You can shift your clinical focus. We really do have that freedom and control, to some degree, with our scope of practice. But a lot of docs get caught up like you did. And I was there too. I mean, your story is very similar to mine 10 years ago when I realized, is this what I want? I'm running a practice that has all these people in it. At the end of the day, I'm tired and I'm going home to my 2 sons and I'm not showing up the way I want to as a mother, and they're little and it's overwhelming. Yes. And is this really what I want? I love being a chiropractor. I love sharing the truth of health and healing. And how do I do more of that and let go of all of this? And when I reframe my business model into a simpler practice, when I shifted into my new location, it opened up so many other opportunities to get on TV, to start the podcast, to start coaching people, so many different ways. But you have to, first of all, get clear on what you want, and then have the support, which you did as well. It sounds like, to actually, be courageous and take that step, right? Because for you, leaving a practice that sounds like it was thriving and doing great, but leaving you as a woman feeling burnt out, to leave that and start something new takes some courage. So can you share with us some of your thoughts around that, or what it was like at that time? Because I guarantee there's people listening to this that are maybe in a similar place right now.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I dealt with, there was a few things that happened, actually. I should say it this way. I had one of my massage therapists who worked in another chiropractic office, a very large center with a massive team, said, hey, listen, the people that own the clinic heard about what you do, and they're really very interested in your work. And would you consider going to talk to them? And I was offended. I was like, dude, I have my own office. Why would I go see somebody else's? Right. But there's we're just taught that that's the way to be successful as a chiropractor, is that you do your own thing. Right. But I knew something was off. And then shortly, a little bit later, I got sort of the renewal notice for my lease. And my bookkeeper, who has become a friend over the years, so kindly reminded me that 2 years previously, when I had renewed my lease, she said, you told me you were going to do something different for the next time this lease is up. And oh, by the way, it's up again. Okay, fine. Somebody's watching me and saying, listen, I'm holding you to account. And
sounds serendipitous to me.
It absolutely was. And then I went and met with that clinic owner. It wasn't the right opportunity for me. And a friend who's a chiropractor said to me, if those guys are interested in what you do, Fiona, there's got to be others. Who would you like to work with? And there was a clinic not very far from mine that I had been using their physiotherapists for my patients for years. And I thought, geez, I wonder. And they literally were 3 blocks from me. So the patients didn't have to go very far. I wasn't going to lose a bunch of people because they had to travel to a different part of the city, and that was a concern for me. After spending all the time building a practice, you want to make sure you're caring for people. And they were very excited to hear from me. We met, things started happening. And you're right. When you're in the zone, right? When you're in the space of flow, and you get rid of the stuff that's distracting you, right? And the clinic running the business was distracting me, because I very much come from that era and generation of you got to know how to do everything yourself. And I wasn't very good at delegating. I can see now that I've got the mental space to do that. The delegation is such an important part of success. And so I think for me, I had to go through is this a failure? Am I failing? Am I failing by closing my clinic? Are people going to think that? Like I had very much had to go through all of that. And then there were so many things that pulled me forward that I knew I wasn't in charge of what was happening. I literally just had to surrender to it. And I did. And it's been honestly the best business decision I have ever made. I wish I had had my head out of my ass sooner and had done it sooner.
Mm-hmm. It's a certain level of, trust, confidence, and fearlessness, like things definitely, I believe that things will line up, right? If you're on your path and you're following your heart and your head and using a little bit of logic to think about things, but really following your heart, then the path tends to be clear for you. If it's, one of my colleagues said, ease is always a characteristic of an innately driven process, right? So if there's an ease that will flow, if you're truly aligned with who you are and what you need to be. But a lot of doctors and humans don't ever take a time to step back and say, wait, who am I? What do I actually want? What does success mean to me? I've got a great practice, but my relationships aren't where I want them to be, or my health is not really great. And so many doctors have shared on this show how they've had to come to those moments of realization, like, I'm not happy here, something has to shift. So if someone is listening right now and they're feeling like they need to make a change, what would you tell them?
I think a really important thing is being able to discern what your heart is saying from what your head is saying. And for women, we have a bit of a superpower here. And but our internalized patriarchy lets the ego come and step in and say, no, you can't do that. What will people think? Or who does she think she is, right? So whatever gets you into that space of your heart and being able to tune into your gut and your intuition, that's what you need to do. And in that space where ego isn't allowed a voice, ask, what is it you want? Is what you're doing an expression of what you thought it would be? So, for me, meditation is a very important tool I've used. I started meditating my first trimester at Palmer. Some people drank. Taking to that space is really important for me, and allows things to flow. And for me, when things started to happen around the time I was transitioning my practice, there was so much magic that showed up. I could not deny it. And, very, very much there were moments where I just went, obviously, it's the Jesus take the wheel moment, right? Not to get religious on this, but just be like, okay, I'm not in charge. So I'm taking my hands off the steering wheel here. I'm just going to show up and see what comes up.
Yeah. And, speaking of you following your heart and intuition, I feel like it's taken you to another passion project of really working with women to support their health. And you have a really successful podcast. You're also coaching women in that space. Can we talk a little bit more about that and what's fueled that and how long you've been doing that? And for certainly listeners that want to follow you and find out more for their own health, as well as for the people in their practice.
Yeah, sure. So when I was at Palmer, there was a female chiro that was coming to town from St. Louis who was teaching what she called at the time restorative endocrinology. Now we would call it functional medicine. But I had enough interest in women's health from my own experience, from my own deep love affair, girl crush with Dr. Christiane Northrup, who taught me things about my body that my own mother couldn't, and she, of course, came from the generation where you just didn't talk about these things that were sometimes not so attractive. And so when I started taking the classes, there was a real passion that sparked in me. And I was just taking them as weekend classes when I was at school. I never really expected to do anything with that information. It was purely just for my own knowledge. And when I started my first practice in Boulder, I had a lady whose name I can remember to this day. She was one of probably my first 10 patients. And I happened to say something about, supporting her perimenopause. And she was like, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? I need what you've got. You need to be, I was like, no, wait. I'm a chiropractor. I don't talk about these things. I'm musculoskeletal, don't you know?
Yeah.
And she was like, no, the heck with that. She said, I need what you got. And so I had to create an offering for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And I still do it to this day, some 15 plus years later. And in fact, I just did it, an hour ago. Mm-hmm. And so really, I learned that it wasn't just me that needed guidance around my hormones and my cycle and my physical body as a woman. It was a lot of women. And over the years, it just became, I don't know, my pencil sharpened to the point where it became really obvious it was about the perimenopausal era, which is 35 to 55. So that's a huge era, right? Mm-hmm. And those were the ladies that needed me the most. And as I was building my chiropractic practice, I used to go out into the community and do lectures, which were called Not Your Mother's Menopause. And because to me, that was channeling all the things my mom couldn't share with me about her body and her experience, but that I could share. And right. All of the women that couldn't ask the questions because they felt like good girls don't ask those questions, I showed up and gave the information knowing what they needed, right? They didn't have to ask the question because we have all these common experiences as women, especially during perimenopause. And so, in the space of a year, I did something like, it was like 37 lectures around the city. And it was sort of my first year of practice here back in Canada. I have this great name. It's my best marketing. So people knew Dr. Lovely is the hormone doctor. This is how it all started. And then somewhere in the midst of all the craziment of running a practice, I came across Dr. Ed Osborne, who was teaching about podcasting for chiropractors. I had never even listened to a podcast when I first started talking to Dr. Ed. But what I knew was that I didn't have the time to go out into the city anymore to do these lectures because, we didn't do these platforms like we do now, right? And so I thought, okay, well, the podcast is going to give me a chance to have my local community hear the messages. It'll be a good marketing piece, all of those things. Sure. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And of course, Dr. Ed's training says, make sure you've got at least 3 episodes to launch. And so I did. And then I totally chickened out when it was time to launch it. He had to launch it for me. Which I wonder if he remembers that or not.
It sounds familiar. I think from my working with him back in the day, and even still sometimes when I want to launch something, I'm like, tell me this is a good idea. Give me that, remind me again, and he'll give you a push. But that's what coaching is about, right? It's when people can see more in you than you see in yourself sometimes and can be your biggest cheerleaders and give you that outside-in perspective that we sometimes need because we'll call ourselves on our own shit and our own fears and insecurities and challenges. But awesome. So you launched the podcast, or he launched it for you.
Yes, Ed launched it for me because I was scared shitless, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think about that now too. All of that whole time, there was a lot of stuff that happened that I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was not in charge. I was absolutely not in charge, but I was allowing things to flow. Mm-hmm. And again, that's part of our superpower as women. We can just tap into that space where we're grounded and connected. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I launched the podcast. I did not expect that anybody would really listen to it. I figured it would be my local patients. And that's not at all what happened. And I have listeners from around the world. It's the coolest thing. And I get regular emails from listeners asking for either me to cover a topic or can I help them, which is fascinating, isn't it? Like I really envision a time where people can access healthcare, not based on their geographical locale, but based on the skills and knowledge that the practitioner brings to that particular person. And but anyways,
I think we're getting a little closer. I mean, in the last year, when people have had to transition to virtual experiences with their healthcare professionals, except their chiropractors, right? Yes. I think people are getting more accustomed to that. So I think we're getting closer. But I feel like your experience starting a podcast was mine initially, because I just had to get my voice out there, because I felt at that point when I first started Rockstar Dr. Moms, it was like no one's talking about, women's experience in chiropractic. That was 5 years ago. Lots of things have changed, since then, but I didn't have a business idea. I wasn't looking at what can I do with this? It was just like, I have this in me to do, and I have to just do it. And I remember Ed saying the same thing to me, like, what's the plan? I'm like, I don't know. And then sure enough, it has blossomed into some amazing experiences I've had coaching with other people and running group programs, and then coaching for him. And, you never know, right? When you show up and you follow your heart and where you feel called and led to create something.
Absolutely.
And so now you've been asked to create programs for people or guide them, and you've been able to transition and expand your practice or your business as a consultant, essentially, for help for women.
Yes. So last year, I launched the membership for women who listen to the podcast. Thank you, Dr. Ed, for helping me with that again. And I love having that space where women can access support. Let's put it that way, because women heal each other. And in having conversations, putting stuff out there and saying, hey, I'm experiencing this. Am I losing my mind, or is anybody else feeling this too? We heal each other in that space. And the feminine's really being called forward right now, big time. Big time. And the evolved dudes are like, please take over.
Well, I don't think a day goes by when I don't think thank God for my girlfriends. The conversations I can have with them about,
everything,
business, about parenting, about relationship, health, like anything. And women get other women.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. And just earlier this year, I kind of took on a passion project, which is to work at sharing information with women about how women specifically are at a higher risk for Alzheimer's and dementia, which is the quiet health avalanche that no one's talking about because it's ugly, right? No one wants to see their parent lose their shit. No one wants to see their favorite auntie's cheese slide off her cracker after so many years of having a great relationship with them. It's so painful. And yet I know from talking to women about their hormonal health that we're not talking about it because we're afraid of it. And so my job, I think, I probably saw myself as a chiropractor this way, as well as with my hormone work, is to pull back the curtain and say the stuff that we bring to the light can no longer own us on a deep level, So when we bring forward the fact that most women I know, and this is especially true at perimenopause, are worried about whether or not their brains, they're going to end up like their beloved family members. And, I have family members that have either been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. I know it's in my genetics. And so for me, last year with the shutdown, with all of the stress around that, I started to feel like my brain wasn't working the way it had previously. And which was scary as hell, I got to tell you. I thought, is this it? Is this how it starts? And I know there's a lot of women like that. And so that's about the time I started intermittent fasting, which is still my number one tool around brain health. But I started to really look at what was in my genetics and what could be done. And I've been fortunate enough to be the student of some amazing thought leaders, researchers, and physicians in both functional neurology and functional medicine. And it's a really cool lineage to be a part of. And I thought, you know what, this needs to have This needs to have the feminine touch to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I feel like I'm bringing, is a gentle and loving approach to information that can really work to improve a woman's life and reduce her risk,
Mm-hmm.
and not scare the shit out of us in the process.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important to me.
Yeah, and I think it's thank you for sharing that. You're right. I mean, there's so many things that we don't want to think about because the pain that it would cause us to think about them, right? To think about mental decline for ourselves or for our loved ones or anything happening to our physical health. And so, you're right. But when ignorance is not bliss, I don't think, right? Like when you don't know, it's disempowering. So, you mentioned the power of meditation, really to get quiet with yourself and tap into who you are and what you want. That there's also plenty of health benefits for men and women with that. Intermittent fasting, I'm a big fan of that as well. If you were to round that out with like another tip for people, those both meditation and fasting support your brain health. Would there be one more that you find yourself recommending a lot?
I think
you can give me more than one.
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. Certainly controlling inflammation is so important. And there's
diet,
a lot
lifestyle.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why the brain gets inflamed. Well, the body too, right? There's a lot of reasons. And they can essentially all be managed in one way or another. And to know means you can do something about it, right? And we really need to start thinking about brain health like heart health. Heart health, we can see stuff coming. We go, okay, gotta do this, this, and this so that my heart works better, right? Brain health we need to start looking at it that way instead of it being a scary thing. Anyways, inflammation, the biggest thing with inflammation is dysglycemia, is what is your blood sugar doing? And I'm not just talking about, I realize that I'm going to be speaking to doctors, mostly are going to be watching this. Yeah. So for your patients, they don't understand that that's not just a diabetes thing. You have to explain to them that that's all of us. And so, controlling blood sugar, testing blood sugar, seeing what foods react. For example, sweet potatoes are a really good example. Some people have a really high sugar spike from sweet potatoes, even though they're healthy food that are loaded with lots of nutrient. But you got to be careful. But for some people, it might be something else, so you have to know. And that's really where functional medicine comes in, because you can be precise and what we're calling precision medicine based on the genetics, etc. And the genetics are just one part. That's another thing I would recommend, is know your ApoE status. If you're looking at dementia and Alzheimer risk, your ApoE status will tell you what your risk or your likelihood of having Alzheimer's particular is. And you can act accordingly. And we can be really precise with food recommendations in particular, with fasting recommendations in particular, depending on what your ApoE status is. And then test your hormones. You got to know what's going on with the hormones, especially at it's andropause for men, which is the midlife hormonal change, and perimenopause for women. Especially there, we need to know what the status is, because for women, there's about a 6 to 10 year window where we have an opportunity to amend the hormones to reduce the Alzheimer's risk.
Interesting. So, and listeners, viewers, we'll put the ways to connect with Dr. Fiona Lovely in the show notes, because this is a topic we need to be well versed on for our own health, as well as for what we can share within our practice. You're so inspired. You've got this passion for what you do clinically, this passion for brain health, this passion for women's health. What keeps you so inspired?
Sharing truth with people. That's my raison d'etre.
And have you ever had times, aside from the time we talked about where, you knew that you needed to shift something because you're running this big business and you weren't really feeling like who you wanted to be as a chiropractor. But aside from that, have you ever had times in your life where you felt down, frustrated, disconnected from your path? And if so, how did you get yourself back?
Meditation's a big thing for me. If I'm really stuck, I need to drop everything I'm doing and get my body moving. Because I find that if my body isn't moving forward, my brain can't move forward.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, that happened to me last night. I had to work out with my trainer, and before he arrived, I said, "You might need to give me a few minutes. I feel like I'm going to bawl any minute now." And it was because the day I hadn't practiced and things on my mind, and he got here and we were just really quiet, and I'm trying not to cry. And then I started like warming up and moving my body, and then he had me doing like burpees and jump squats. And I looked at him, I said, "Did you change the workout because you knew I was feeling kind of emotional?" He's like, "Partially." He goes, "Well, we got to get that dopamine up." Right? Because,
Yeah.
and for me, like moving through the workout definitely
Yes.
changed my energy, but then I felt like a different person by the end of it. So I'm with you. Like, move your body as much as you can.
Oh, yeah.
It changes everything from a mental health and emotional well-being standpoint.
Yes. And women in particular, we tend to hold the burden of keeping all the things together for the
Mm,
family, for our jobs, for, whatever, for our relationships, for our parents, for all of those things that we get this. I mean, you want to know why women have chronic neck and shoulder pain? This is it.
mm,
Because we hold the experience in. So, in particular, women must make sure that we are doing movement that has that feminine softness to it. Women are really good at those serpentine movements. It allows energy to move through us.
like
And this
dancing.
is, yes.
And I say, like, you just dance every day. Like,
Yeah.
you
Turn
can't
on
not
some
smile if you're dancing.
Exactly. Turn on some music and shake your boot. Hey, you
Yeah.
just can't go wrong. And
Yeah.
in fact, it's really interesting, but the form of exercise that shows the greatest decrease in risk of Alzheimer's is partner dancing.
Really?
Isn't that fascinating?
Okay, fellas, I hope you heard that, because your partner, men, if you're listening, start dancing with your girlfriends, wives. Ladies,
Yep.
pull your man and start
Yep.
dancing whether they like it or not.
Yeah. And it makes sense, really, because you're not only doing movements that are feminine, so they're connecting to the divine feminine in you, but you're doing cardio and you're doing the social connection,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the physical closeness. All of those things play a role.
That makes such sense. I think that's a great way to wrap this episode, because now I want to like put on some tunes and and start dancing. Thank you so much for your time. I know you have a lot of different things going on in your professional life and your personal life. We didn't even get to talk about, what does Dr. Fiona do when you're not being Dr. Fiona? How do you keep your, beside meditate and dance? What are some other things that keep you grounded and connected to who you are as a woman?
Yeah, great question. Again, my meditation and journaling practice are a really important part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure that every day, first of all, strong boundaries, so important. And having a sacred container every day where I have the time to do whatever I want to do. Most of the time, that's reading or writing.
Mm-hmm.
And those things keep me very balanced. And sometimes that time is used to talk to a girlfriend or whatever. Really important. But being in nature is huge. Thankfully, we're surrounded in some amazing nature. My husband and I make this joke on the regular. Years ago, we were at Emerald Lake, and there was a tourist bus full of European travelers in Emerald Lake. And if you've not been there, it's gorgeous.
We were there last summer, I think. Yeah, it was a beautiful spot.
It's beautiful there. And we overheard ladies speaking very strongly accented English standing on the beach there. They said, we had no idea Canada was so full of nature. Which is so cute. Anyway, so this is sort of the joke in our house, is it's time for us to go out and experience all of the beautiful nature that Canada has to offer. But thankfully, it's so close to us here in Calgary, and I've been known to hug trees in my neighborhood. Like, sometimes you just need that grounding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I love to cook, to make great food, and my social networks are everything to me. So that's what
I like
keeps me
that
going.
idea of a creating a sacred container, or at least carving out some time for yourself every day. And I know, depending on listeners, where you're at with your lifestyle, with your business, with the ages of your children, like sometimes finding half an hour, 20 minutes, even 5 minutes to yourself in a day can seem impossible. But if some days it's 5 minutes, if some days it's an hour, take the moments that you can and be intentional about it to get yourself quiet and reconnected to who you are and what you want. And it makes a massive difference in how you show up in every other part of your life. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for everything else you shared on this conversation. And listeners, if you want to connect with Dr. Fiona Lovely, be sure to check out the links in the show notes and learn more about all the wonderful things she has to offer.
Thank you. I very much appreciate our time today.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.